Hi everyone, this is my electronic resource kit, and my first artifact is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which will help me as a teacher understand the varying levels of intellectual development that my students could be at. This artifact will show why some students might be underdeveloped in their learning. For example, a child might not have or might have low levels of self-esteem. As a future educator, I could interpret this as a lack of belongingness. So to combat this, I might incorporate more interactive and social learning activities which involve buddies, which would then increase this student's self-esteem and their sense of belongingness as a result. So for my second artifact, I've got Carol Dweck's video speech on the power of yet and growth mindsets. I believe if I implement a growth mindset into my teaching and into my assessment methods of my students, it'll benefit the intellectual development of my students to a greater degree. I think next up, I have a picture of a university classroom with everyone using their laptops, and I think back to my schooling where we had maybe one computer in the classroom and it was only used for games, and to education now and in the future where children are growing up with technology. So I think it makes sense to harness this and harness their pre-existing knowledge with technology and use it in our lesson planning, in my lesson planning, and in future studies. So for my fourth artifact, I have a table outlining the ethical standards of teachers in Australia, and I've obviously highlighted the Victorian standards. And it makes me think back to a particular teacher I had in high school who would often preach their own opinion and shut down other people's ideas and opinions on controversial topics. I think as a teacher it's important that we respect everyone else's opinions, even if they're against our own. And this will make all our students feel included and that their opinions are valued. And it will also teach our students to develop similar ethical standards. A mind map on the learning theory constructivism, and this really has taught me different approaches I could use as an educator. So for example, I could use problem solving assessment tasks rather than just having the standard test with right and wrong answers, and this allows students to bring in pre-existing knowledge and solve problems together collaboratively. I have the social learning theory mind map, and as I'm studying to teach PE, I will frequently use and implement this learning theory into my teaching. Because PE involves a lot of demonstration and learning through demonstration, students will be paying attention to my demonstrations, they'll be repeating the steps that I take to execute certain motor skills, and the end result will be that the students will be able to replicate these skills adequately. I have a mind map which I created from a reading, and it was based on intelligence and intelligence theories. Now when we think of intelligence, we just think of smart intellectual people who get good marks, but this goes deeper into it, and it shows the different levels of intelligence, and this is really useful and beneficial in giving feedback to my students, because although one of my students might not possess strong creative intelligence, I could give positive feedback perhaps on their strong practical skills, which is a different level of intelligence. I have a mind map on the different types of assessment, and I think as an educator I need to understand each of these and use them in all of the subjects I teach, and not just focus on the one. So for example, I can involve class discussion and pre-tests and brainstorming activities. For assessment for learning, for assessment of learning, I can have the usual exams, tests and essays, and assessment as learning, I can have things like evaluations, journals and feedback. Next up, I have a comparative picture of two different classroom settings. Obviously the picture on the right is more of an open plan classroom, which is something I would rather teach in because I think it promotes more of a constructivist and social environment for students. And it also allows me as a teacher to split students up into groups with peers who are at the same level of learning as them. The results of my online strengths quiz, which I took in week 7. I think it's really interesting that one of the lower attributes I have is a love of learning. It's probably the one I would like to improve on as I'm becoming an educator. If I don't have a love of learning, how are my students going to love learning?